I'm Aryeh Schwartz along with Ben Dole, and welcome to the Winsidr show where it's all about the W. Free agency news is starting to blow up. Not going to waste any time. Let's hop in and discuss. If you like our show, please consider joining our Patreon community, patreon.com/Winsidr. For less than a cup of coffee a month, you can directly show support for the hard work we do covering the W. And don't forget to see our amazing staff's written content at winsidr.com. That's winsidr.com. While you're there, check out our overseas tracker. It's live now. You can see where your favorite WNBA players are playing overseas all in one place. And also make sure to check out our free agency tracker. You can keep track of all the movement going on during free agency, curated by the one, the only, the Ben Dole. Ben, welcome to the show. Finally, some WNBA free agency news is going. It's some big names. There's a lot to talk about. First of all, how's your psyche doing? How are your emotions doing as this news starts to break? And then let's dive in.
Yeah, I just woke up from a nap. Did anything happen? You asked me to do a podcast right now for some reason. I'm trying to figure out why.
Oh, Ben. Well, the news that you might have missed while you were napping is Candace Parker, according to Ramona Shelburne of ESPN, Candace Parker has agreed or has committed to joining the Chicago Sky after 13 seasons with the LA Sparks, the face of the LA Sparks. Candace Parker, who's originally from Chicago, so she's going home. In the article, you can see it on ESPN.com. Ramona references that it was just too good of an opportunity for her to pass up, for her to be able to play in front of friends and family. I honestly, gut reaction when I read that, and this wasn't scripted or anything, was kind of like, do you think fans are going to be in the stands, Candace? Like when I read that part, like I completely get it, and I'm not saying that after this season she's going to be gone, but that just popped into my head. Not here nor there. What's your gut reaction?
Candace just wants the post-game portillos, right? That's what she brings up all the time when they go play there.
Yeah, that's what it is. And that won't affect her ability to get up and down the court having like a billion giant, heavy, deep dish pizzas. Let's talk about, let's start. There was other news that broke also, Nneka Ogwumike, but we'll get to that in a moment. First, we're going to talk about the Chicago Sky side of things. What does bringing Candace Parker to this team do for them? My gut reaction, I mean, you talk to me, I've been quite vocal on this. The biggest issues facing Chicago are they were one piece away. I don't know if that's an issue, but, one piece away, one star player away, one go-to. And then the other biggest thing, honestly, was, first of all, and I'm going to throw some shade here, I don't think Steph Dolson fits into the system properly. I think they needed a player more like Candace Parker. And now they have Candace Parker, supposedly or expectedly, or however you want to put it, whatever the proper wording is. But for me, I mean, that completely changes the projection of their defense. Their defense was a big concern, right? This past season, I've looked at the numbers. I don't know if you know this, but the Chicago Sky last season shot a WNBA record field goal percentage, which was quite crazy. One of their big issues was turnovers, and that's the offensive side. And I know I'm going all over the place. There's a lot to unpack here. But Candace Parker's interior defense, defending Defensive Player of the Year, I think has got to be the first thing I think about in the positives that it brings to this Chicago Sky team. What about you?
Yeah, they were 8th in defense this season, 9th in defense last year, and the general barometers, you want to be at least top 4 or close to it. With those numbers, teams might be clustered close together. So, but you want to kind of be in that ballpark. And the bigger picture thing is for Chicago, you got to always be aggressive to try to improve your team. If you just look at the roster they had, and if they just re-signed Cheyenne Parker, I don't think they were going to be good enough. And they had to be all in on this window right here because you got to re-sign all these players next off season. And if Las Vegas and Washington load it up and Seattle runs it back, they just aren't going to be good enough. If Diamond to Shields totally takes off, maybe it's interesting, but you gotta look for a way to try to improve your team. And Candace playing next to a dynamic two-way player in Azrae Stevens, who can also get much better. That's a really exciting team. DeShields, Stevens, Parker, 3-4-5 with Vandersloot and Quigley in the backcourt. That's going to be an incredibly dynamic offensive team.
Oh, scary. I mean, they're going to be able to do whatever they want. I mean, they have the tools to play whatever style they want. And I think Candace Parker really complements these other players well. And I'm really happy you brought up Azrae Stevens. Stevens is a player who not only do I see inklings, if you will, of Candace Parker, and I don't say that light, but also just thinking about the knowledge that Stevens can get, having, similar body types, having similar styles of play, whether it's completely or not completely, like, let's not get into a debate about that, but just the educational aspect of it, of having Candace Parker there. I mean, I think that's huge. I like that. That's just really freaking big. And like, now I know, Wade and Candace have a close relationship. So I'm excited to see kind of where that goes. We're not going to get into all the reported drama between Candace and Derek Fisher, but I mean, all right, let's put it this way, Ben, as of today, as of January 27th, 2021, a few days before free agency officially picks up, with this news, have the Chicago Sky become maybe not your favorite, but are they a top 2 or top 3 team to win the WNBA championship this coming season?
I think it's still going to be those 3 teams I mentioned if they have it, but it's a little early. It's just too early for that. We have to see what some of these teams actually do. We have to see what Chicago's going to do. It would seem like there's going to be some more moves on the way, just with the way they're structured salary-wise. But just the larger point, I think acquiring Candace as opposed to largely just standing put, I think that really does elevate them. You have the element of Candace protecting the rim, which I think would be an improvement over bringing back Cheyenne Parker or what Steph Dolson can do there. And in a sense, I think just overall being a better presence there. But just the offensive point of it too. If you're going to beat one of these good teams, you got to score against a team that's locked in on you in the half court. We know how exciting the Chicago core can already be in transition, but to have another option in the half court, you can play 5 out. You can have Candace hitting cutters. You can post her up. You can run stuff to attack a switch, and then Candace is just going to destroy any guard if you happen to switch onto her. Having that extra option, it's just they're gonna be a much elevated kind of threat against the best teams.
And yeah, I mean, it highly elevates them. I'll say it as of now, based on the rumblings. I think they're a team with a target on their back, right? Players coming back healthy, hopefully. From all indications that I've seen, we've seen Diamond practicing, we've heard of Azrae is healing up and things like that. So for me, it's just like, it's no longer this team's narrative of being an underdog and proving something. Now, this is completely shifted. And I think this is going to be an interesting aspect for Coach James Wade to navigate that, because we can talk about they came onto the scene since he's been there, and there was some high expectations for them last season. But I definitely think the narrative around this team, the motivation for this team, the handling of this team is going to be quite different than we've seen in the previous years during the Wade regime. Any final thoughts on Chicago before we move on to the LA aspect of not only Candace, but Nneka?
Yeah, it's definitely fair if you want to really try to size up the picture now. Maybe you make it a group of 4, obviously moves pending with those other 3 teams I mentioned. Got to see what Phoenix does. Minnesota, are they making a big addition still? LA is going to have to probably be a rung down. We're going to get to them, obviously, but with the reports that Chelsea Gray's in talks to leave. That would obviously hurt them. You can't totally write off Connecticut. We'll see what in the world actually happens. We talked about the whole Alyssa Thomas thing on a previous episode, but yeah, it's really exciting for Chicago. I mentioned all these players hitting free agency in 2022. We'll have to wait and see too what kind of contract Candace is getting, and if it's going to be for that upper max, it would have to be a sign and trade. So we'll see how that works out. But they're really going for it this year, and you hope for good health across the board so that you can actually get to the playoffs and then see how good you can be.
Yeah, completely agree. It'll be interesting if it is a sign and trade because, yeah, well, I'm not even going to get into that because then
it's just on the player, right? It's just like if the player wants that salary and the team will give it to you, that's your only option.
Yeah.
Right? And if you're LA, if you're going to at least get something, you have a reason to cooperate. So could it be the number 8 pick? I don't know what it is, and Chicago doesn't have a reason to give anything up. But yeah, we'll have to see how that plays out salary wise.
Yeah, and look, not to break any eggs or whatever the term is, I don't know. But I have to assume, looking at, there's discussions of Chelsea Gray moving on. Chelsea and Candace are extremely close. Candace was Chelsea's bridesmaid. We're one of the bridesmaids for her wedding. So seeing this news come out, I think if you can put the pieces together, obviously nothing's set in stone. Well, because you can't sign anything till February 1. But I think it's quite obvious what that means for Chelsea's career and LA moving forward. Let's move on to LA. A perfect segue. What does this mean for LA? I mean, they had a ton of people. Owen Pence wrote an article about how the best way for LA to win is to keep these players, right? And keep the star 3. There's been lots of discussion of what's going to happen. Well, what do we know now? Thanks to Rachel Galligan's reporting, sources have told Winsidr that WNBA star Nneka Ogwumike agreed in principle to a multi-year deal to return to the LA Sparks. Ogwumike was one of the top free agents this offseason, made her decision after taking meetings with at least 2 other teams, and also big respect to Rachel Galligan, one of the homies. People were then going out, rightfully so, saying, well, how is she negotiating? How she's talking to these other teams? Rachel follows this up with, sources tell Winsidr that Sparks GM/head coach Derek Fisher actively encouraged Nneka to have conversations with other organizations embracing a new era of player empowerment in the WNBA. That's a whole nother thing that we can impact on another episode. But obviously, look, great sign that they're, as of now, it seems to be keeping one of the 3. Obviously a blow that they lose Candace Parker. What do you think the triage is for LA Sparks? Because right now, hey, I got family. I got some diehard Minnesota Lynx family who were probably feeling the exact same thing or a similar thing last season when Simone Augustus news came out she was signing with LA. Sparks fans got to be feeling some type of way hearing the face of their franchise is leaving for Chicago. Talk to me about LA.
Yeah, for the Sparks, it's a bummer. I mentioned, the next reporting that Chelsea Gray's in talks with Vegas. If you're losing 2 of your big 3, that's completely devastating. You have Christy Tolliver under contract who didn't play last season, so there is that element in a way. You could call Christy a 2021 free agent addition in a sense, but it's going to get tough at this point to see how they rebound and still can become a championship contender right away. There are just so many pieces on the chessboard, and with them having 3 of those players as free agents, LA was the team where some of that movement would have happened. So, for now, I don't know. For now, it's a shock to the system for sure. The legacy of Candace in LA on top of just what they're hoping to do immediately. It's a huge blow for sure.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I would like to think it means hopefully Masha Vadiva is going to be coming over. Expanded role for her. Not a bad look for this team. Is she, look, I mean, a week ago, we're talking about if LA can re-sign Parker and Nneka, and well, here I'll even put it this way. I mean, when you look at the free agent pool, the majority of the front court players that you would be more pressing to bring onto your team were on LA. So in my mind, when I hear this happens, I go, okay, how can they fill it? Now, LA has been extremely deep in their front court for years, right? You have Nneka Ogwumike, who is an amazing player to have coming off the bench, right? You have Nneka, you had Candace, now you don't anymore, and you have Masha Vadiva, who is a player that we have continuously heard great things about. I've heard many teams over the years have reached out to try and snag her from the LA Sparks, and the LA Sparks are basically like, good luck, good riddance. What do you think the makeup of this team is? And if you're, let me ask you, put on your Derek Fisher bald cap, are you now saying we need to bring in a different starter? Or are you saying, eventually we had to start a new era. Eventually this was going to happen, that she wasn't going to be on the Sparks anymore. A player doesn't play forever. And we do have this young talent. Like where would your mindset be? Or I guess you don't even need to put on your GM cap. Tell me from your Ben Dole cap, what would you do?
You're not just totally rebuilding with Tolliver and Nneka on the team. You're not gonna, catapult to the top of the lottery and rebuild with these high lottery picks. And I don't think those why would those players sign on if that's the goal? They're just gonna have to see what they can do from here. Now, after losing with Candace going to Chicago, as you mentioned, is Vadiva going to be a starter? Are they going to re-sign Nneka Ogwumike and have the sister act up front together? They've got to make a decision there. And then what are you doing on the perimeter? You've got Brittany Sykes there as a restricted free agent. Well, if two of your possible big salary players are out the door, that changes the dynamic, where at first they may have worried about finding enough room for Sykes. So in a way, that's good news for Sykes. If she wants to stay in LA, you'd think that would free up more money for them. And then you have to decide with the backcourt. So you've got Tolliver. So are you pursuing a point guard? Are you going to ask Tolliver to handle the ball a lot? Because there are a few more options, high rotation starter kind of options in free agency. I think that's the question you really have to ask if you're trying to pivot quickly and look at the point guard market. Jasmine Thomas and Erica Wheeler would have to be the two names that come up.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting. And while we're recording this, news is breaking that Kayla McBride has agreed to terms with Minnesota, and she's championship ready. What is your reaction to that? Big news.
Wow, how about that? McBride to Minnesota. So that 2-guard spot was one of the things we had kind of circled a little bit, right? That's kind of a fitting way for them to upgrade the team, pencil somebody in between Crystal Dangerfield and Nafisa Collier. And if the Aces are in talks with Chelsea Gray, that obviously makes sense, that Vegas is chasing somebody else. So signing Gray to a big contract and signing McBride wouldn't have really been possible for them. So good move for Minnesota. You're getting a big time shooter, scorer, has become a really solid defensive player. So that's the kind of move they needed to look to compete next year. And Las Vegas, you'd think that obviously if you're them, you would hope that this goes through with Chelsea Gray.
Yeah, I agree. Everything you say. I'm a fan of Kayla McBride going over there. I think it's a smart move. I think she's the right type of player. I'm curious if they did, reach out or not reach out, because I'm sure all these discussion happens. I'm curious how it came to be Was it that she wanted out? So Vegas, but these are the back elements of it. But I'm excited. That definitely catapults Minnesota to a much better team, a scarier team. And I hope we can see a rested, a revived Kayla McBride this coming season, because it's going to be an exciting one. Any final thoughts on any of these three topics?
Yeah, so LA, as we've been talking about, do you try to add a point guard playing next to Tolliver? Mention those two names there. If you did put the ball in Tolliver's hands more, could you go after Aerial Powers? Alicia Gray is a restricted free agent. Could be another interesting target there. Alicia Clark, more of a your 3-and-D wing. Benijah Laney, unrestricted too. So you're looking for perimeter players. There's still a group of names out there, right? So from LA's perspective, if you can actually land somebody, like I said when we started on this section, you're just not going to be as good than the version had they run it back. But you're doing what you can now. We'll see it. We'll see if they can pivot. And and we kind of touched on the front court there. Not quite as many options there unless we have some of these core players moving around. Liz Cambage, Natasha Howard, Alyssa Thomas obviously being injured. In the front court, not as many options externally. Emma Mieseman, unrestricted. Tina Charles, both in Washington. Cheyenne Parker, there was the reporting with the Knicks that she was in talks with Atlanta. So I think the big focus for LA has to be somebody on the perimeter. Whether it's they do re-sign Sykes, or if they even lost Sykes and maybe they chase two of these players.
Yeah, wise words. Well, that's all we got. Logging off for this episode, and make sure to tune in. We'll be getting more for you.